With the land flipping, I mean, it is what it sounds like. That's the biggest difference. We are buying the property. We're putting our names. We're not looking for buyers before we buy the property.
The good wholesalers, and I met with a guy in Tampa, and he does tremendous due diligence. That's how good ones can stand out, is by actually doing the work for the builder. If I go to Anthony and he owns 10 acres in Hunt County, Michigan, and I ask him, to pay $50,000 for his property, and I'm like, hey, I need 120 days to close. Ron comes in and offers him $40,000. And he's like, hey, I can get you your money in 2 weeks. Who's going to win that? Hey, everyone. Welcome back to the Real Estate Investing Podcast. Today's topic, we're discussing wholesaling versus flipping. And we're going to talk about this specific to land, but also the philosophies behind it and what we see in terms of the value to the sellers, how it gives you value to you, and all things in between that. Today, I'm with Anthony, and I'm with my brother and business partner, Ron Apke. Guys, welcome back.
Yeah, happy to be here, Dan, and get on this topic. It's a huge topic, I think, with people getting into real estate investing in general. Like, there's different avenues. There's pros and cons to both, I think, that we will discuss.
Yeah.
So I think this is a good topic to get into.
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. People in the community do both, so I think this will be a good topic.
And it's one of the most, when you just look at our YouTube comments in general, I don't know if you guys ever scrolled through there, but a lot of people coming into the lives and stuff, they're like, you guys wholesale? Or you guys wholesaling? You guys assigning? What's your assignment criteria? Things like that. So this is a highly talked about topic always. That's why we do this topic in house flipping more than a bunch of other things, because things change and we want to continue to educate and keep up with what's going on. And there's also a lot of, which we can get into this episode as well, there's a lot of regulation changes too with wholesaling.
Yes. Yeah, very good point.
But all right, cool. So I want to get into actually like quick overview, guys, of what our process is with land flipping, so we can define both of them. Let's define, and Ron, you can start land flipping, and let's just start with land flipping in general and our process with funding and how it works.
Yeah, so with the land flipping, I mean, it is what it sounds like. It's the same thing as house flipping. Like, we're buying and reselling. That's the biggest difference when we talk about these two different things, is we are buying the property. We're putting our names. We're not looking for buyers before we buy the property. So we get something on the contract, send it to title. We line up funding, whether it's us funding it ourselves or we're outsourcing funding somewhere else with a bank type loan or a partnership type loan, whatever it is. Once we're in title, we're lining up however we're going to pay for the property. We're going to go through closing. We're going to buy the property. And then after we buy it, that's when we're listing it. That's when we're trying to resell it.
Right. You got anything to add to that, Anthony?
No, it makes, I completely agree. A lot of times people think that is wholesaling, but we're buying it in our own name. So
100%.
And we're buying it for a discount. That's the one thing I didn't say. Like, obviously, when you're flipping something, you need to buy at a steep discount. We buy for 40 to 50% of market value.
Yeah. And one thing we do on our end in terms of wholesaling in general is people ask if we wholesale land. And we do in a way with double closes, and we'll get into that later in the episode. But we wholesale a lot of land, specifically you, Anthony. You know how? Fast cash.
Oh, fast.
That's wholesaling. I mean, that's just a little, it's a different,
buyer.
We're the buyer on that end, but we're buying from a wholesaler essentially on that. But let's talk about, we can go into that a little bit and how that works, because that is a wholesale. Like, we are paying them an assignment fee to acquire properties. And for those who don't know what I'm talking about, we have a program called Fast Cash within Land Investing Online, where we will buy you out a deal. So you guys bring us deals, and we'll give you 10, 20, 50 grand to take it off your plate, and we'll do all the work essentially and sell it, and you don't need to worry about that. You get the money when it closes, and that's an assignment. But we're going to talk about wholesaling and just the process behind that, not in terms of fast cash, just wholesaling in general.
So with wholesaling, you're essentially finding a buyer before you close on the property, or you're not really finding a buyer. You're lining up a buyer, and then you're getting some kind of assignment fee. That's what it's called. We can get in double closing later, Dan, but with wholesaling, like, you are lining up a buyer. Whether you have a buyer's list, a lot of people in house flipping or wholesaling houses have buyers lined up, and it's a flat $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 fee, kind of like we said with what we offer with fast cash. So that's really a difference. Essentially, wholesaling is going to have a line item for an assignment fee. Yeah. That's how I kind of view wholesaling. Like, it is going to have a line item for assignment fee. There's not multiple transactions. It's one transaction that happens, and that's why that line item's on there, where X person brought you a deal, you're paying them X dollars to take over the deal, and that is going to be all on the closing docs.
And when can you ever do that not on the closing docs and just have a back end contract?
You can, but I don't know protection wise for the person who sold the contract. I'm sure you can, but I just think it can create more headaches.
So essentially, you have to, let's get into the details with wholesaling then, because you'll have to find a buyer without owning it.
Correct.
Talk about that.
I think it works so well in houses and other asset types because there's buyers that buy a ton of these. Kind of like what we do with fast cash. Like we're a buyer for, it doesn't matter where the hell the property is. It doesn't matter any of that. If you get a good property at a good price, we'll offer you fast cash money.
Right.
And that's why these people who do it with houses, they have a buyer's list. Can you list it on Facebook try to find a buyer like that? Absolutely, I think. You definitely can. But I just think it gets a little more hairy with closing docs. I think it just gets a little more shady then.
Yeah. You have anything to add to that in terms of buyer's list? Or I know you've worked with past wholesalers too, though, so you understand kind of what they've been through and the pros and cons a little bit. Do you have anything to add there?
No, I think it all just depends on how you want to operate your business. There's plenty of people that are just deal finders and they just want to sign contracts, and that's very common.
And not worry about the disposition for sale and all that. The delay of income also.
Yeah, exactly. But there's pros and cons, risk for sure to mitigate that, but I'm sure we'll jump into that in just a second. But no,
yeah. And that's the thing for if you're wholesaling land, and a lot of people do that, especially in the infill lots. Then you find builders, you hear that word and stuff. And we've had Eli on here, and that's his whole philosophy is finding builders first and then going. So when you're wholesaling, you kind of work the opposite of us. Yeah. You find the builders and then find the deals, because a $4,000 profit, if you have the builder lined up, is fine. They're going to go through with that and just assign it, right, for $4,000 or $1,500. And those are some average margins with the infill lots when they're wholesaling to them. But you can get good builders and build that up. But that's one of the main differences. It's like you find the buyer first and back in. And that, I think, is where the philosophy is extremely different. Our philosophies acquire, like put all your resources, all your energy into acquiring under market value, reaching out to leads, getting for 40% market value, and just, it's all about, we know where we're going to sell it. When you're flipping, because we own it and we control it. When you're wholesaling, you don't own it, you don't control the deal, and you're limited to your buyer pool because you can't just necessarily put it on the MLS and find buyers that way. And it just makes things much more difficult. And that's where the philosophy changes, is the control of it and the disposition process, and not backing in instead of putting all your effort on the front end and acquisitions.
Yeah, I think the back end person, whoever's buying it or paying you the wholesale fee, the assignment fee, needs to be able to make some money on it. For us, when we offer someone a $10,000 assignment fee with the fast cash, like we're still making money. But if you're trying to get market value, you're getting, like, it needs to be a developer, it needs to be a builder, something like that, where the back end person is making money too.
Yeah.
Where houses, it's a long-term investment. So a lot of times they can get market value, like their difference between where they are and what market value is, they can get a lot of that difference in the assignment fee because the end person's going to hold it, they're going to rent it out, they're going to do all that, versus land, like, our margin is in the equity we have left over after we pay you an assignment fee. A developer's margin is in after they develop the property.
Yeah.
So it's definitely different. Having your buyers lined up, if you're trying to do that, is important.
Yeah. And even if you do have an attorney in fact and you're wholesaling and all of this stuff, there's a lot more risk to it. We're going to get into the pros and cons, and I don't want to jump into it right now, but I think there can be a lot of different risk you're associating. Obviously, financial risk is mitigated with wholesaling. You're not putting resources into it because you're assigning the contract, but there's risks that come into different areas when you talk about lower profit potential and losing the deal potential and things like that we can get into. And I think that's a good transition, though. Let's hop into that. Let's hop into the pros and cons of each, because we'll talk about land flipping first, pros and cons compared to wholesaling, and then we'll get into double close, because I think that's a good barrier to entry. But let's get into that. You want to start, Ron?
Yeah, I think wholesaling, let's just go wholesaling first. I think pros are, I think it's less money in. I think having your buyers lined up, I think you can make money faster, quicker in wholesaling. I do think the ceilings, speed to making money, the risk mitigation. You don't need money, you don't need funding partners for all this.
No
you
money
need
out.
Buyers. Yeah, no money out for the deals. So I think that's huge for wholesaling. I think going into the cons, do you guys have any more pros for that?
Well, you said risk in general, and these are really all the cons of land flipping. If you just look at them, it takes longer, right? Speed, the risk. But yeah, when you're looking at risk in general, it comes down to things. When you put money out in your land flipping, and you have money out, and you have either a funding partner or whatever, and something's wrong with the land, and then it comes back, there's risk of that as well, I think, Ron.
Yeah, and I mean, we run into those situations not regularly, but it happens where there's due diligence that we find out from the first buyer after we listed the property. We already have our $20,000 out. The first buyer tells us something that we didn't know about the land. We're like, okay, that's fine. I don't believe you, whatever it is. Second buyer comes back and says the same thing. You're like, oh crap, we get something might be wrong with this land. We got to actually figure out. One thing as you were saying this, another pro is I think you do not need to know the asset. You don't need to know the asset the same, because if you find a buyer, it doesn't matter.
Oh my gosh, wholesalers can be really bad with this.
Yeah, you don't need to be able to comp out properties. Like you do, like it makes you way more efficient. But if you're doing this, especially for land, which is extremely hard to comp, like you can just post it up for $5,000 more than what your contract is. Yeah. If you find someone great, but if not, you're going to screw over the seller.
But I do think the good wholesalers do good due diligence
100%.
too, because they're trying to.
They're not wasting time.
But oh my gosh, if you look at my Instagram direct messages and just see, hey, looking for a buyer here, and they give me a piece, and then I don't even look at them anymore. But when I would look at them, and I don't say that in a bad way. Like if you guys have a serious inquiry, I'm always open ears for sure. But 99.9% of the time, those properties 400% of market value. I'm like, this, or it's in a wetlands, and they didn't even know it's in a wetlands. Yeah. So I think wholesalers can stand out, and I'm not trying to, talk bad about any party or anything. It's a very generalized approach. But the good wholesalers, because I've met them, and I met with a guy in Tampa, and he was giving us some good leads, and he does tremendous due diligence. That's how good ones can stand out, is by actually doing the work for the builder. Yeah. You're going to make more money. You're going to build more relationships and trust on that.
Yeah. And I would say just an extra pro to that is, like you guys are mentioning, you have the opportunity to test out a market too with essentially no risk.
True.
So you can really give you a good idea. And then if things look good, then you can really double down on your marketing.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really low point of entry. That's what I like about and a lot of people transition to our business model from trying to make $2,000, $3,000 assignment fees for
less
a couple
resistance,
months. Yeah, exactly. You build up $15,000, $20,000, and now you can okay, now I want to make this a full-time thing. Yeah. Go over to flipping. Going into cons from there, I think margins are huge. Huge
average. I think less than margin. Yes, it is bad margins, but I think more importantly, and Anthony have been talking, it's the spread per deal, the profit per deal.
Yeah,
it's so low.
You got to do a lot of work for sometimes $3,000-$4,000. Like doing as much work as some wholesalers say they do for like $4,000 profit, stuff like that. Like you need a builder, you need all this different stuff, and just a lot of work.
You need to go through title. 100%. You need to go close. You got to sign docs. You got to. This stuff adds up. And I'm not saying don't go after They're smaller than that. I see these guys checks they're posting. Like a lot of them are $2,000 checks, which is fine at first. Like if that's gonna get you up and motivate you in the morning, just know that's the same amount of work of buying a property for $200 and selling it for $230. And taking a $30,000 spread, and you're going to have you're providing more value doing that too.
We had 2 deals in our deal review 2 nights ago from the same person. I think they were both like by $5,500 each. Obviously you need the capital. Like that is a thing. You do need the capital, or capital partners, but she was selling both for like $21,000 or something.
Correct. But I'm saying even when you do, and we're going to get into, we do wholesale deals. We just do it through a double closing method. I'm going to define double closing in this as a wholesale, because it really is when you look at it. There are some changes. But the philosophy as a whole is similar to it. But I'm saying if you guys are, doing spread $2,000 spread deals where you're making $2,000 on assignment, what I was saying is go after 50 and sell for 65, or buy for 100 and sell for 130. Doing a wholesale still, just going after bigger deals. I don't like those tiny margin deals. I just don't.
I think another con is like you're restricted by your buyers list. It's hard to list these properties. Like you can get what's it called?
Attorney in facts, max innovation,
all this stuff. It's difficult to really list these, and there's so many regulations with these things.
It's changing.
Yeah, it's changing really fast. That's another con too, is how more like South Carolina, you cannot, like most attorneys are not going to do wholesales for you. It is very, very difficult. The wording, I think the verbiage and like the law is kind of being questioned maybe right now, but there's just a lot of states that are adopting things because the reason they're doing this is because how much it screws over sellers. There's so many BS wholesalers who are getting sellers under contract for 400% of market value, and there's no money to be made, and just the sellers just
they just sit and wait. Yeah, and they're overpromised and underdelivered consistently, and I don't blame them for changing the laws on this. We have a solution we're going to come that we do a lot of in our community at Land Investing Online, and we'll get to that later. But I want to ask you guys, what do you think the biggest con is? And I don't think you've touched this one yet.
I would think, if anything, I would say speed, especially because like how you were mentioning, Ron, you're you're only as good, I would say, as your buyers list that you have. And if you're wholesaling and you're coming across someone like us, we can do an all cash offer. We're closing in 2 to 3 weeks. If you're looking to assign a contract, you're going to have to explain that to the seller. It's a little bit harder of a pitch. And I think just with this and the efficiency that we have with all cash and we're the one buying it, it makes it a hell of a lot easier to get them under contract for us.
It does, to get them under contract. But in terms of speed of getting your money that you make is typically faster with wholesaling, because then you can turn around and sell it quick and you don't have to go through 2 closings essentially. You go through 1, and if you have a buyers lined up, the average transaction speed of wholesaling is, from what I've seen, is faster. Do you agree? Do you guys agree? Is faster
to get your money,
get your money, your money, right. Not necessarily the other person's money. In land flipping, it's the opposite. They get their money quick. It's easier to lock up the deals because you get them in 2 weeks, but and then it takes a little bit longer to sell. You put it on the market, it sits, then you have to go through title again. Rather, if you're wholesaling, it's less value to the seller, like you're saying. Yeah. But then once you do get them under contract, the actual process of getting the money, because it's just a quick assignment essentially. Yeah. But
it's competition that you have written down for the con.
That's a good one too.
Yeah, I was thinking like competition / like offer proposition.
You know this one.
Value proposition, because I think wholesaling has such a.
But what happens because of that? Value proposition. What happens?
Speed of money.
No, yes, but what else?
I don't know.
Keep thinking through what happens because of when you wholesale deals. What happens? No one.
No.
You lose deals.
That's a good point.
More people you're spending. You have a 90-day, 120-day contract.
Yeah.
So you offer. Yeah, I got you.
It's the offer. It all leads to it. It's the value that leads to it. It's not
lack of value.
This is the result. Yeah, the lack of value that leads to it. The result is you can lose deals. And let's just give an example. If I go to Anthony and he owns 10 acres in Hunt County, Michigan, and I ask him, to pay $50,000 for his property, and I'm like, hey, I need 120 days to close, and then Ron comes in and offers him $40,000, and he's like, hey, I can get you your money in 2 weeks. He's like, I got an offer for 50, but you can get them in 2 weeks. Who's going to win that? Ron can still negotiate up and get there, but he's like, Ron uses his negotiation skills. He's like, listen, a lot of those deals fall out. He doesn't even have a buyer lined up. That's why he needs it. I can get your money right now. Who wins that negotiation? Ron does. Another example is, hey, Anthony, I want to buy your 5 acres, same thing. Neighbor Sue comes in within 50 days later. I haven't communicated with you that much. I've talked to you like twice since then. I kind of forgot. Sue comes in. Sue goes, hey, if you're ever willing to sell that property, I live right here. I want some extra land. What happens then? He sells to Sue. That stuff happens. That's why closing and communication, the speed is so important when land flipping. Is the longer you drag something out, the more likely they are to fall out, because life happens. Their kids come and give them opinion. Their neighbors come in. They don't need the money anymore. Whatever happens, happens. And that's the biggest thing in my mind, is like the lack of value leads to losing deals and and all these different things trickle from it.
Yeah, people always ask, like, how do we buy properties for such a discount, like a steep discount, 50, 60% under market value? And like, that is the answer. Speed is the answer. That's something you do not have with wholesaling in terms of the proposition that you're offering the sellers. There are the good ones, though, have a builder lined up. Like the good people who are good at wholesaling.
And that's why I feel bad for the term wholesaling, how it's gotten such a bad rep, because there's a low barrier to enter. It's like drop shipping.
Yep.
It's a low barrier to enter, and it attracts people who aren't willing to put in the work and do that. So 90-something% of them aren't, but go on.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, is like that speed value proposition that you can offer with flipping. But there's such a wide array. There's so many crap land flippers. There's so many crap like every industry, you have a lower tier, but the lower tier is worse when
it's worse and bigger.
It's worse when the entry point is low,
because anyone can come in and
exactly
do it.
And that's how so many people are doing it. They're dialing 5 calls a day. They're getting someone under contract for 120% of market value, and they're screwing them over. And that's why all these laws are coming.
It's the same thing. Like, how many people are out there trying to manufacture, high tech equipment and stuff like that? The barrier to entry for that is like, okay, research and development. Okay, we got to invest in product and all this, and it's millions of dollars, right? So the more money and time it takes to develop something, the less people are going to come in it. Typically, it's just a barrier to enter.
Yeah.
And for wholesaling, it's extremely low.
Yeah. I think going into flipping from there, Dan, like it's kind of just the opposite, honestly. Flipping, I think you can build a legitimate business around flipping as far as like higher margins, higher margin per deal.
Yeah, lower competition.
The cons are there's more money and like you have the funding partners, all these stuff. But what other cons, like in terms of if you're comparing the
Well,
two?
don't just pass through that. You got to close the deal and fund. That's a big one.
Yeah, getting money for the deal is an important thing. There's so much money out there though now. That's why I kind of pass over it really fast. If you're involved in communities,
and it's getting approval, and it's sending it in, and then going back and forth, and getting your due diligence back to them. It's a whole thing.
Having to review deals, I think having to actually know market value or having to understand the skill, that is a skill that we often overlook because we've been doing this for such a long time. The skill of being able to predict market value of a piece of land within 10% either way is very few can do it.
Yeah. You want to touch on that funding aspect though of what you see from your end in terms of, because you're actually on the front end of assigning these deals with the fast cash versus this, and you understand how their minds work with this. So some of them are just lazy and don't want to. I shouldn't say that. They don't want to do the due diligence.
Yeah.
I shouldn't call it lazy because there's a lot of people who take fast cash because they want more marketing money. It's a good offer. It's an extremely good offer, and it gets people out of the deal and money quick. But you see their mindset of why they accept fast cash versus the traditional deal funding.
Yeah, it's definitely a mixed bag of the two. Some people who prefer fast cash, they want their marketing capital back quickly, and depending on the scope of the deal, I mean, we've done fast cash offers of like 150 to 200 grand, right?
Yeah.
Like, so you could still make a boatload of money
And faster, yeah.
Yeah, with fast cash, which could be phenomenal. But a lot of people like to do traditional deal funding because they want to take something full cycle too. They want to work with someone that's experienced. There still is very minimal risk doing traditional deal funding, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But in terms of what we look for, it's like you have to do the due diligence. There's plenty of times to where people will send something in without really an analysis and like kind of put it on us. Not the best look, but again, if it's someone that's willing to put in the work and they're asking questions, like those are the things that we look for. Mm-hmm. And so you really have to be smart and strategic with who you're building those relationships with and making sure you can grow and scale with them.
Absolutely. And we get tremendous. Most of the people we work with are very, very good with their due diligence. We have a good community of that, and everyone seems to do really well and work with you, and they want to make it work, and they want to work with us, and it's a win-win relationship, and everyone's happy, which we love. But traditional deal funding is essentially, for those who are newer, most people watching might know this, but it's just where Anthony will put up 100% of the money, and it will be a profit split on the back end, depending on how long it takes, your experience, the deal margins, all of that. The profit can range, but you usually keep majority of the profit. Let's talk about some other. So the biggest pro for land flipping over wholesaling, I think, is the margins in the deals.
100%. Like you have so much control of what you can sell it for. You have time on your side. I'm not saying you want to hold it forever. There's just a lot. You can do projects with it. Like, that's a huge thing. You can't do projects if you're wholesaling a property. Right. You can propose that to the end buyer. Like, if someone comes to us, and that's what I'm really excited about, is like, we're paying assignment fees to these people and we see the project-based opportunity. And I think that's a huge, huge future where maybe they're under contract for 80% of market value for the 30 acres. But like we see like, okay, we can sell this for so much more once we split it into 3-4 parcels, whatever it is. There's a lot that go into that. I think a lot that goes into that, but I think just the restrictions of that is important.
I agree. And then also you have, when you're actually flipping, there are no laws against flipping. So on the, other side of wholesaling where all the laws are changing and everything, flipping, there are no real laws on. There's some new mail laws and things, but that's not actually the process of flipping land. That's just solicitation laws. And then you have the speed. So the speed of land flipping, you'll close quicker on the acquisition side, like Anthony was going into. But a lot of times to get your actual money would take longer because, say you go under contract, you close, you put it on the market, you put it on Zillow, land.com, you control the deal, right? So when you control the deal, you can put it wherever, you can do these projects, whatever it is. But then by the time you sell it 30 days later, it goes through title, you're not closing, you don't get your money for a little bit longer. And that's after title on the front end. Mm-hmm. So the seller contacts you, you got 2 weeks for title on that side, due diligence, everything, maybe 3 weeks. You close the property on the buy side, then it takes a month to sell, you're 7 weeks in, and then title again, maybe 2-3 weeks. So you're looking at, it can be months and months, depending on how quick you sell the property and the, contract on the back end, the sales contract. But that's definitely a big one too, is speed. What else for pros and cons of land flipping? Let's stay with pros.
I think just being able to build something, like I think there's like, I don't know, I guess you can do it with the wholesale. No. I'm not saying actual structures. I'm just saying like the business. Like
sustainability of the business model.
I think you said building. I think you said building. Yeah, I think the sustainability of the business model, like there's a lot of moving parts.
It's land investing.
Yeah.
Broad term.
Yep.
How we do it changes a little bit, but land investing is sustainable is what you're saying.
For sure. Yeah, there's so many different, like we're not doing things the exact same way we did things 24, 36 months ago.
We used to send out offers for 18%.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah.
Look back at our mailers from year one.
Yeah, exactly. Strategies change with that. Opportunities like, when you get into flipping, like what it's going to evolve to is more project-based things and filling in with some of those like really rural, buying things for 40%, flipping and whatever. But those project-based things, then you have relationships with surveyors. You have all these different relationships that go into like building a real business. I don't know. It's different. You can definitely build a wholesaling business like that. It's just different volume, lower volume. You don't need to do as many deals in a year to make $100,000. You can do 2 deals a year and make $100,000.
Yeah. I mean, you can do 1 deal a year and make more than that depending on what deals you target. But so far we have, the risk does rise a little bit with land flipping. And we can talk about that a little bit, but we have ways to mitigate that risk. We have good ways to mitigate that risk. And I think the biggest thing is, we have a 3-step solution of how we walk through. And when the risk is low, we flip, right? Mm-hmm. And let's talk about different types of risk in land investing. And we talked about that in the wholesaling, but like land comes back bad, right? You buy it and something happens. You have the risk of it not selling. You have the risk of the deal funding's money, or if you have traditional funding. Risk is broad with this, but in general, there's virtually no risk with wholesaling. And that drives why you have a lower profit because the value goes down, but you're taking on risk to make more profit here.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's like 3 different types of risk. I think land quality is 1. I think price is 2. Increased price is going to increase your risk on a deal. You have lower margin, something going wrong, and then you also have like legal risk as far as like risk with the restrictions on the property, poor due diligence, almost what I call it.
Yeah.
So you have those 3 types of risk, and those 3 types of risk like all can reduce or eliminate your margin. If you find out something after you bought the property, like, okay, this road is closed half the year. We literally had a property we bought once where you could only access it 9 months of the year. Yep. That was a huge issue because you can't build on something like that. It's literally a wreck property then. So that legal aspect, you also find properties where there's defects in the land, which should be able to be caught most of the time. Mm-hmm. And then price is something that's very like, you should know if you're buying it for 70% of market value or 30 to 50. You should know the difference. And once you get higher, like that margin just decreases, and there's just this risk in buyers not being willing to pay what you think they would have paid.
Yeah. Anything to add to this risk profile?
No, but just one thing to piggyback off of that. I think that's the reason why we love this land flipping business model so much, because if you utilize traditional deal funding, the investor is essentially taking on all the risk, right? I mean, True. Still do your due diligence. You want to have a good relationship.
You have no risk.
Exactly. And all those things are laid out. If you work with an experienced land investor, they'll make sure to help you out. I mean, those are things that we do, people who are newer. Make sure you're doing the work, but also we're going to make sure it's a good deal for us too.
Yeah, we didn't touch on that enough. So essentially with traditional deal funding, since it's a profit split on the back end, there's no fixed return, there's no credit scores, there's no banks involved. It's us 3 looking at your property saying, we'll take on this risk. You have no risk. We'll put up the money, but you got to give us this profit when it sells. And that's why people join too. That literally mitigates the risk for people joining tremendously, especially while you're learning. It gets another set of eyes on it. And we're going to be strict with the properties too. We're going to make sure we're buying the right asset because the risk is on us, and that's why we do our due diligence as well as you do them, and to confirm everything as well. But all right, so we talked about pros, cons, all that stuff, the philosophy, what the 2 are. We can come now to let's just talk about how we utilize it and what we teach, because we do both. So there's a method called double closing. For those who don't know, I bet most know. It's where you essentially it is wholesaling. It's not wholesaling technically, but when you look at the philosophy, it really is, because what you're doing, you're getting the property under contract to sell for 90, 120 days, whatever that looks like. And then you have an attorney in fact and everything, and you're putting it on the market essentially, and trying to find buyers on Zillow and the MLS and land.com and Facebook Marketplace and everywhere you can. But then on close day, what you're doing, you're essentially just swapping hands in one day for both transactions. So it goes from the seller let's just call her Barb, from Barb to me, and then from me to the future buyer. So you're doing both transactions on one day. It's called a double close. It's common, and the reason it's so common is because of the changing laws. So we're not wholesaling, we're not assigning. There's no assignment contracts on it. It's two different transactions, two different set of paperworks, two different deeds. The deed's going to go into my name, and that's why I love it, is because the sustainability of it versus assigning. There's more complexions to it for sure. There's some different things. You have two transactions, more moving parts, but anything to add to that process as a whole, and then I'll talk about what we do to balance the two.
Yeah, I think there's no line item, like the differences, guys. There's no line item assignment fee because it's actually two separate transactions. Like this is two transactions. That property is moving hands twice in a single day. There's no line item there. You have a little more freedom to list, and you don't have a buyer's pool. Like for these, you don't have a buyer's pool lined up. This is for, and you can talk about it, Dan, a specific situation where there's a seller just is stuck on a number and it doesn't make sense for you to buy it as is.
For sure. So I think let's just talk about the process then of how my mind would rationalize balancing these two. It's like, when do you go for double closes? When do you go for land flips? How do I know the two? Am I targeting one mailer, a double close, and one mailer? That's not how we do it. We're going to target everything to flip because of the reasons we said in the pros and cons. There's more money in it, which is pretty much everything. There's more money. You're going to make more money. You're going to make more profit. You're going to be happier and have more financial freedom, right? That's why we do it. So we're going to target everything to flip. So let's just use blind offers. So I sent Anthony a mailer out, 5 acres, to buy it for, $40,000. Mm-hmm. Option one, what I want the very most, where there's the most profit, is to get that contract at 40. Because if I price correctly, I know it's going to sell for 95 or whatever you priced at, right? That's goal number one. Goal number two, Anthony calls me back, is to negotiate with Anthony. Okay, he needs a little bit more money. He's not happy at 40. He asked for 52. Can't do 52, but I can get you up to 44. I can get you up to 44. I talked to my partners, all is good. Let's roll at 44. How's that sound, Anthony? Anthony says yes. That's goal number two. Come up with a price that still makes sense to go back to and get your deal funding. The margins are still there for traditional deal funding. Option number three, Anthony says, I can't take anything less than 60,000, right? I think this property is going to sell for 90, whatever, but Anthony can't take anything less than 60. So then it's like, okay, do I have $60,000 to give him? There's $30,000 in this deal still, we think. The margins get a little bit tighter. Deal funding's not going to work at that price. I can't get, loans and deal funding for that necessarily. He won't come down. He bought this property in 2018 for $60,000. And they're stuck there. You tried to negotiate. You went through option one, you went through option two, and now you're here. That's when we're like, all right, Anthony, I tried to get you and negotiate, in the 40, I offered you $43,000 or $44,000. You said no to that. You won't come off that 60 number. I can get you that $60,000. I'm just going to need more time. I can't close in 2 weeks like I promised. I'm going to need 120 days. It's going to line things up and assure that I can find someone on the back end that's going to use this land and buy this land. But I can get you that $44,000 next week. If you want to go this route, I just need 120 days. How's that sound? Then Anthony says yes, and then we'll go into a double close option.
Yeah, that's the pitch. And I think the people who really believe in the value proposition of the two are the people who do the best. Like if you're losing so much money if you're not offering that, or if you don't want to skip to that. That's the key, Dan.
You don't want to skip that.
Do not want to skip from the $44,000 offer to like, okay.
If anything, skip the double close and ignore what I said and do the first two parts.
Yeah.
And because there's people making millions just off the first two. But I'm telling you, this method works.
Giving sellers the option, like when they are stuck and you're not getting them off that number, giving sellers the two options and just being very blunt. $44,000, you can get it next week.
Yeah.
$60,000, give me 90, 120 days, and I'll get you that. And you want to be able to know that property's going to sell for 90. You don't want to screw people over with this and waste your time selling properties or listing properties that buy for 60, sell for 67. Like we don't want to do that. But if you have the margin in there, this works unbelievably, and you'll add hundreds of thousands of dollars a year.
Yeah, because there's so many leads that'll come in to where someone's wanting something closer to market value, and as long as you have good margins for a double close, like why would you not want to take that opportunity?
Spread more than margin, I think, though.
Yeah, good point.
Because if you have a $200,000, and that's what I'm trying to, when you're double closing, margin, yes, but spread more. Like
margins can be a number too, though.
Yeah, it can be. But I think a margin says, I came from distribution and it's a percentage in my head. Yeah. Okay. So what I'm thinking in my head is percentage of margin, because I came from distribution and everything was based on profit margins, right? And the percentage that you're selling. For this, I'm talking spread like buy for 200, sell for 250. That is a good spread right there.
Yeah.
If you can sell that for two, and people are doing that, and you're going to make $48,000 after closing costs or whatever it ends up being. But there's one other thing I want to get into before we wrap this up, and there's other risks besides money. So Anthony agreed to $44,000. Or agreed to his $40,000, and he signed the contract and sent it back to me. I go on thelandportal.com. I'm looking at it. I'm doing my due diligence. 3/4 of the property is wet and sloped. Not great, but there is a building spot and it's dry right there. Kind of like that Wisconsin deal we were looking at the other day in the deal review. You know, like 3/5 of it, wetlands, whatever it is.
Yeah,
part of it's there, and I just don't like my deal funding partners don't feel good closing this because of that. I don't feel great because it's all wet. You know, first thing, same thing happens here. First thing, I'm going to try to get it to a price where maybe I can still close. If it makes sense in my head. Maybe I have to go from 40 to 25 or 40 to 20. And you'll get those deals. Don't be scared to negotiate. You'll get those deals. Yeah. You got to tell him, like, he knows that 3/4 of his property's wet, right? So don't be scared to negotiate down. But when that still doesn't make sense and it's just too risky and it's in an HOA or something too, like those are common situations. It's just like there's nothing built in that HOA. It's in Asheville. It's $150,000 for an acre and a half and nothing's built in that HOA, but there are a couple $1 million properties, like you see the upside there too, but it's just risky to buy. That's when you go to the double close also. So there's money risk, and then there's also the actual asset risk of the land.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it will eliminate headaches on the backside where you're buying a property that when you're buying a property, like, I don't know about this. Like, when you're doing that shit. And like, it will eliminate those headaches on the back end if you're proposing double close. You don't want to overdo it where you're trying to do it for every property that you're a little nervous about. But when you don't want to deal with a property where you don't have margin on the back end, but you potentially have $100,000. You just don't know based on the asset because the asset is so much different than all the comps. I think that's the biggest thing. If you can't find comps for like-kind assets, that's when you kind of have to do that because the asset has some kind of defect that doesn't really have comps around it similar.
Yeah, and the risk is really just the asset, which is the land, or the price. That's how you have to look at the risk, and you'll run into these a lot. And we say it more and more every week. Like, if we don't like a property, we used to just say, don't buy this. Yeah. And now we say, look for a double close potentially.
Yeah. I feel like we always are asking, like, we always say, sorry, not asking, or I say, like, man, if this was good land, like, this is a no-brainer. Yeah. And, like, when you're saying that in your head, it's probably like, okay, I need to propose something
that means it's a good market, good high market, price, good price, profit
right
potential is good.
The acreage.
Yeah, exactly. Anything to add to that, Ant?
No, I completely agree. The only thing you're limiting yourself with a double close is some people, they'll submit it for deal funding for like fast cash, or if they try to go for a double close, they still try to think they could subdivide it. You're not really going to have those capabilities when it comes to development.
It's tough. There are ways, but it gets really niche, and there's creative financing ways where you can go to the seller and you could do profit splits with the seller too, and go to the seller and say, hey, listen, I can improve your land for you. Yeah. You want to take 25% of the profit? I guarantee you to get your principal back based on this number, and then I'll give you 25% of the profit after that. We can make huge things happen. You live in New York, the properties, there are ways to do that, but it gets very complex quick. Yeah, but there's a ton of money in creative financing in general, but we'll save that for a whole nother episode. As always, guys, thanks for joining. Please like and subscribe our YouTube channel. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're on Spotify, hit that thumbs up, give us a comment on Spotify, whatever that means. But as always, guys, thank you for joining. We'll see you next episode.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, everyone.
As always, thank you for joining. Please do us a huge favor and like and subscribe our YouTube channel and share this with a friend. It really means the world to Ron and I, but more importantly, it could help change the life of someone else. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you next episode.